America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government protecting our liberty.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Tonight, I will be your co-host with my co-host, Mary Lotze, and we welcome and introduce Sheriff Lew Evangelidis, High Sheriff of the Worcester County Sheriff's Department. Tonight's topic will be focused on federal grants and state grants for drug and opioid addiction, as well as the status of a new dog program called Project Good Dog. Welcome to our show, Lew.
Always great to be on FATV with my good friend, so I'm really pleased to be here tonight.
Well, let's start this off because a lot of good news has been coming out of the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. We've been paying attention as we're big fans of you and in your office. Most recently, federal and state money being received to help with the opioid problem, which, let's face it, has been hitting our communities hard. An $800,000 federal grant was just received that will help addicts and abusers who have gotten into trouble with the law to opt out of jail time if they are willing to enter an inpatient drug rehabilitation program. Do you see this type of program and expenditure of funding being used widely for good programs?
Well, there's certainly, as we've talked about in the past and ongoing, unfortunately, is we are fighting a real war right now. And I don't mince words. We're in a war of drug addiction in this country and an opioid war, and we're losing, frankly. I mean, we're at least addressing the problem. I've always felt this way, that the American people have always risen to the occasion, and I'm not here to, give a history lesson, but we all know just in the last century, I mean, we've gone to Europe on 2 occasions. We took on some evil empires. American people were instrumental in really saving freedom for the world, and we've continued to do that through the wars in Korea and Vietnam and the war on terror. And yet here we have a war happening inside the borders of this country, killing more people per year than we lost in the entire Vietnam War. And yet I don't feel sometimes like we're looking at it as that type of war effort. And I'm really hoping to continue to beat that drum that we need to do that. And these type of federal programs and these kind of grants definitely make headway in fighting this battle. But it's a big challenge because it's a very multifaceted war we're in. And I'm not trying to pick on any individuals per se, because I think it's a system. But when you have, really the OxyContin, which was the centerpiece of this whole thing, and there's always been alcohol and marijuana and things like that, and then the legalization, I don't think helps anybody here in the long run, because it sends the wrong signal. And I try to use my experience as sheriff, working with inmates, 90% who are substance abusers. Mm-hmm. So I got a pretty good pool of people that are firsthand experienced and can tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. And they don't want anybody to make the mistakes they made. And most all of them tell us that they start by drinking and then smoking marijuana. These are the gateways to get to the heavier drugs, which unfortunately have often led to opioids and then heroin, and there's nowhere to go after that, really. Except for either recovery or death, because once you get to heroin, you've hit the end of the line. So I'm pleased to see these type of grants, and if I talk about the problem, I really believe when I say this problem, I'm talking about, yes, we've got an overabundance. Well, let's start with an overabundance of demand in this country for drugs. Mm-hmm. What's the root cause of that? We could spend the whole show on that. Yeah. I don't know the answers you, I'm sure, as many good reasons for that as I do. But there is a demand. Then you have to get into how is the supply created. And we have producers of this. There have been some literature put out that these were non-addictive. That was not true. We've had doctors and pharmaceutical industries involved in this. We've had a culture of people that somehow don't feel responsible for their activities now, that everybody's a victim. Mm-hmm. And you add all these things together, and we've got a real problem, and a lot of our young families are being impacted by opioid addiction, heroin, overdoses, deaths. If you talk to our our EMTs or our fire departments or our police departments on the front lines, they will tell you they've never seen anything like it. Yeah. So what we try to do is, Sheriff's Department, is I get an opportunity to get people come to us in the place of their life where they have hopefully bottomed out. Unfortunately, I'd like to say people come in one time, that's it. I've met people there who've been there 9 times.
Yeah.
I've met people there once, and both of those folks have told me I will never come back again, and to this day, they haven't. Some people do it the first time, some the 9th time. What we try to do is identify those individuals who come into our care, custody, and control as sheriffs. We try to identify those people who do want help. We don't have the resources to help every 6,000 inmates that come through our facility, but we have a dedicated staff, and we were part of this program for this federal grant. We got about a $100,000 grant distributed through the state that allowed us to hire 2 substance abuse counselors at the jail. Now, I won't beat this drum, but I have before, and I will say it, that Worcester County's jail and correctional facility and sheriff's department is the absolute lowest funded per inmate department in the state of Massachusetts. And we could go on and talk about the inequity. It's a long time, it's historical, it's not personal, but it's really unfair when I have a budget that's millions of dollars less than departments that have fewer inmates than I do. The reason I say that is because I want to help those inmates that want to help themselves. And when I only have 6.5 substance abuse counselors and other departments with fewer inmates have 25, something's not right.
Right.
Something's not right.
Well, aren't you also in receipt of another grant, $100,000 grant to expand counseling for?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. The 800,000 was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And we started a very aggressive partnership with a couple of healthcare foundations about a reentry program. We identified people. We work with the court, with the Superior Court and the judges. We identify individuals who are incarcerated, who are willing to step up and meet us halfway. And we work with probation, parole, the judges, the district attorney's office, and we have a very in-depth way to get people upon their release into what we believe is going to be a less harmful approach to the rest of their life and a productive remainder of their life. This particular $100,000 grant we're talking about now allowed us to hire those counselors. What I'm really proud to come here and tell you is we have, and it was written up by the Boston Globe of all publications, but came in to see what we call our STOP program. It's a Substance Abuse Treatment Opportunity Program. And we only have 36 beds. It's the old women's facility, Mary, not that you would ever seen it, of course, but it's an old women's facility. It had 36 beds, and we don't handle women anymore. In our, because we're really not equipped to do that. So the women who get sentenced in Worcester County go out to Chicopee now. It's just, it's the system we have. Okay. But it all opened up a building. And we turned it into, and as the Boston Globe wrote, and they interviewed some of the people in the program, and I'm proud to say, they said, we have been in several correctional institutions. We've never been offered a program like this, a comprehensive 6-month program where we have dedicated counselors who work, they live together. I mean, the inmates, they don't get shipped to the classes. They live in this pod. They get intensive treatment. They get daily treatment for whether it be anger management, substance abuse, personal issues they've had. And those folks have the lowest recidivist rate in our facility, one of the lowest in the state of Massachusetts, and we do it at a very reasonable cost per inmate. We can do it, but we don't have any money to hire and expand these programs, and we have a really old facility. So give it to my team. I told them we need to offer that kind of programming in that way to other inmates because it's our responsibility. I mean, the people of Worcester County sent me there to do the job, not to complain about not having the money. They said, do the job and do it right. Hire professionals, no patronage, no politics. Let's get into professionalism and public safety. And I hope you know, and you've been friends of mine for a long time, that that's what we've done for 8 years. And we've hired, just one last thing, and then we did hire 2 people. We offer that program now. In the jail, in some of the blocks that are, the inmates just live in, they have very little activity space. We use the old, where they used to eat their meals. We set up classrooms in there for no money, no additional cost, and we teach people right in those day rooms, right at the end of the block, and we have filled those classrooms with those 2 new substance abuse counselors. We've already had 2 graduation ceremonies through this program, and we're extending those type of intensive treatment programs now to a whole nother aspect of the jail. So we're very proud of it, and I thank you for bringing it up because it's already paying dividends.
And what did you say, 90% of your prison population, and that is what, your prison population?
My prison population.
Your jail population.
Yep. Well, interesting, I'll point out the difference because we have 2 people that we house at our jail. One of the pre-trial inmates, those who are awaiting trial, and those are people we call that are in jail. And then we have a house of correction who are sentenced to less than usually 2.5 years prison. So 2 populations, they're about equal. I know the number today because I was talking to the superintendent today about an issue, and today we have about 959 people at our facility. That's a little low for us. We have been as high as, in my tenure, over 1,200. So we are down a little bit. So that's a good thing. But, you know, we're not going out of business anytime.
And you said 90% of that
90%.
number
Yes.
come in addition or over and above their crime, whatever they're in there for, have an addiction problem of some level.
I use the term substance abusers because some of them are alcohol, some are marijuana, most are opioids or other type of amphetamines or whatever it would be, heroin. The reason I use the 90% figure is they may not be incarcerated because of their addiction, but their addiction led to their crimes that led them to incarceration. So if I always say this, and you know I have a program called Face to Face I bring into the schools, and the one message I bring to students is your actions have consequences, and what you put in your body takes one bad day, one bad choice, you can change the course of your life forever. And most of those folks that have come into our facility have said that's what set them on that course, was the drug. Without drugs, you want to put me out of a job, and you close the courthouses down, as the judge said to me one time, and turn them into movie theaters, then just get drugs and alcohol out of our society, and I promise you the crime rate would drop 90%. It's just a fact, but that's a big challenge to effectuate.
Yes.
That's where we're at. So yes, that's the answer to your question.
I mean, that just tells you how broad it is. And the thing is that now we've got fentanyl. You add fentanyl to the mix.
You better believe
and that
it.
one-time miscue that some young person tries could not just be their pathway to
Could be the last,
long-term.
the last
It could
mistake.
their only
Just to
mistake.
clarify, Mary, it's a great point on fentanyl. Fentanyl is a cheaper substitute for heroin. It's often cut with heroin because it can be cut cheaper than heroin. It's some estimates 50 times more powerful, potent, and dangerous and deadly than heroin. You can't tell the difference. And when you see a wave of overdoses in communities, like, do you remember there was recently in a public park that was
Yes,
like...
that was in New Haven, New Haven,
I believe
Connecticut,
it was.
around Yale, wasn't it?
And there
Yes.
was like dozens of people overdosing. That's when you know the fentanyl has kicked into that type of environment. So yes, that's just added more powder to this keg, and it's a real problem. So yep, we have to have a multifaceted approach. We need to be tougher on those criminals that are dealing these drugs, especially fentanyl. We got to stop how it comes into this country. There's many ways it comes in, but usually over the border some way or another. We have to, that gets us back to the original, the war on drugs that we're on. And, you know, it's complicated, but we can win this thing.
But
we just have to take
it almost seems right now, for our viewers, we are in late October. This will be our November show. But we're watching this, what do they call them, the caravan of some level. Why are people who are so outraged by the war on drugs, but they're not outraged about who's coming across the border bringing what with them? Whether it be drugs, whether it be illegal, bad MS-13 and people like that.
Well, just recently there was a huge raid in Lawrence and another one in Methuen. The raid in Lawrence, they said there was enough fentanyl to kill half of Massachusetts. The one, I believe it was in Methuen, that was to kill the other half because they found an equal amount,
Is that right?
almost an equal amount of the what they found in Lawrence. So I mean, this stuff in Lawrence, sanctuary city. You know, they don't want the federal government to come in there and crack down on illegal immigrants, but yet, you know, everybody has a problem with this the fentanyl, but nobody wants to do anything about it. It takes the feds to come in and do it.
It makes our war that much more difficult because we have a schizophrenic behavior or an approach, a schizophrenic idea of how to fight it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking a long time. I've been to the border twice, as I think we've talked about. I've talked to ICE officials personally, both in Washington and on the border. I've talked to Texas Border Security. I've talked to I've been to federal detention centers in McAllen, Texas during that crisis when there was tens of thousands of people in those detention centers. And I've tried to come back with a reasonable approach to this because we've been let down by both parties. We've been let down by Washington on solving immigration, the reform that we need. The American people are demanding it. They want it.
I think so.
We are a compassionate people. We allow 1 million people into this country legally every year. And I think we maybe need to revise those figures in some way. I think we should find out what type of labor pools are most necessary. Let's allow folks in a sensible approach. We need to also enforce the existing laws that we have now that some employers do not follow. And most importantly, I think the American people are looking for border security as part of that grand bargain. And I think we can do this. And I think if there was the will in Washington, but instead I think we see too much bickering and political playing back and forth. And Mary, to your point, I don't question that there are people coming from Honduras. I've been to El Salvador, I've been to Guatemala. And I have no doubt that there are some people seeking refuge here. But, you know, that could be done in an orderly process to take this in. But now I feel like it's become part of a political football. And during this massive growth, there's no question. People say, do you have proof and evidence that there are various members of MS-13 or other terrorist organizations that I consider MS-13, by the way, a terrorist organization? Are they in there? Well, just numbers would tell you there's a likelihood, and I think the American people would expect their government to make sure that they're protecting those people who are here as citizens of this country. And the way we see this kind of happening, I think everybody's losing faith, and we just see a political football. It's not fair to the American people. It's not fair to people who legitimately need to come to this country. But that's what we're in right now, and it's a sad state of affairs. And I hope we can solve this problem, because I think with American people, like three sitting here, we can solve the problem. We know what we need to do. But Washington doesn't seem to hear us.
Well, I'd like to start talking about the canine program that you have, and the Good Dog program. Everybody loves the stories about the dogs getting their second chances. I know you have a special place in your heart for the shelter dog program, using former shelter dogs in your drug detection, which I went to the movie that you premiered in Worcester. That was a fantastic movie. My daughter, she's 10 now. It was a couple of years ago. I brought her, and she absolutely loved it. But now you have another dog program that works with and helps both needy pups and inmates, which has been called the Project Good Dog. Can you explain it?
Sure.
How did it begin?
Well, the first program you talked about, and I'll touch on it briefly because I love dog programs. I'm an owner of several shelter dogs through the years, so I've always been prone to shelter dogs myself. When we first were elected into the office and we had a discussion amongst my senior staff, well, we felt that I felt we needed to not only offer this community like bloodhounds, and that because we did have them, but also have narcotics detection dogs that were readily available working for the Sheriff's Department, because there's that constant battle of people trying to, bring things into a facility every day, 24/7, 365. If you run a correctional facility, somebody's trying to sneak something in. So we found a program where we could adopt shelter dogs at no cost. We could train them for no cost at the Plymouth County Sheriff's Department, and we could have them work for our department, live with an officer, be a house pet, but be on call 24/7. We've expanded that program to 4 dogs. It's been nationally recognized. We have a bloodhound, which I'm not even in a position to describe some of the details of what this dog has done, because some of it's very sensitive, personalized. But this dog has saved lives just in the last month or two. I could point to communities who've reached out to us. We have a missing individual, whether it be a child or an individual who is trying to escape, or someone who is
Alzheimer's,
very unfortunate. And the dog has found those folks. But we also have narcotics detection dogs, which work every day for us, not only at the jail but in the community. And that's costing us, honestly, except for the little bit of food, not a little, the food we feed the dogs, and the health care, which is donated. So we thought, let's find another dog program. And I always wanted dogs inside the facility to work with our best inmates. People who've earned their right to be in this, what we call a minimum security building. I always dreamed about having a program, and you may know there was the program in Princeton, NEEDS, was in my legislative district. And when I first got elected, I went to NEEDS, and I said, how can we get our inmates to work with NEEDS to help train your dogs, which are phenomenal. They were used for people who are disabled in the military. Unfortunately, they needed about a 2-year commitment. That's a long-term inmate. We don't have those type of inmates in our minimum security area, so we weren't able to get it together. But we did find a partner in the Second Chance Animal Shelter out in the Brookfields. Happened to be some of our inmates were out there working, and I went to visit, and we started a conversation with my superintendent, and before we knew it, we found the one thing that they needed for dogs. They're a no-kill facility. They were over full, and they said the one thing we have, sheriffs have, that other people don't have is unlimited amounts of time. Our inmates have a lot of time. So we found dogs, the slight behavioral dogs. Maybe a dog would jump up when you came into the room, or a dog that was shy and had been a little abused, or things that made them hard to adopt. Well, they would bring in 4 at a time, house training, all those things. they will bring the dogs to us. Another one of these programs, and you know, we all speak the same language as conservatives and fiscal conservatives. This is a no-cost program. Second Chance comes in. They train our inmates. We have a primary handler and a secondary handler. We have 4 dogs usually at a time. They have unlimited amount of time with these dogs. They in the yard, inside. The dogs are usually they stay in the room with the inmates. They've been adopted by the entire block because this is a minimum security area, so the inmates have more freedom. The dogs become the pets of the whole unit. What we've heard is this: the officers say, "Never have we felt safer in this environment. The stress level has dropped. These dogs have made the inmates more relaxed, less stressful." One huge benefit. Number 2 is that the inmates changes people. They get a bond with these animals that change them, humanize them, and they truly believe it's changing them as human beings and making them less likely to repeat offend when they get out. That's a fact. And then the final piece is we are 62 for 62 in dog adoptions. We've had, and the first 11 were adopted by our own employees. Because people would see them out in the yard and, well, what's his name? And, you know, who's going to adopt him? And it spread like wildfire. And so it's been an unbelievable success story for us. I've presented at a conference in Chicago on this to a national correctional organization. There's about 150 correctional facilities represented in that audience. I asked how many had dog programs. 3 hands went up. And when we finished, people were stunned at what we'd accomplished. And we had a line of people asking us for information because and it was a lot of people from the healthcare industry too, psychiatric, and they were like, wow, you have a program that costs nothing, that can help keep officers safe and can help inmates like in a healthful way. This is extraordinary. And if the benefit is the dogs all get adopted, and we've had dogs, believe it or not, you've heard about some of these dogs, believe me, there were dogs in Korea that had been very badly abused and were living in crates that were like chicken wire, and their feet were all, they brought some of those dogs to us. They flew them into this country. There was a horrific situation in Ohio, you may have heard about, where dogs were just left in this area contained. They were like eating carcasses, and they were raided by the feds, and they found 50 or 60 dogs. We got several of those. So we have a reputation now of helping animals that need help. And like I say, no cost. Reform the inmate, make our officers safer. Oh, I love programs. So thank you for asking about it.
Did you get any dogs from the recent hurricanes in Puerto Rico and down in Florida and Georgia?
Puerto Rico. We got some dogs from Puerto Rico.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
I haven't adopted one yet. I'll tell you, every time I go down there.
And they're all breeds mixed?
All shelter dogs, predominantly. So there's some of them are purebreds, but most of them are mixed breed dogs. But they're beautiful. They're wonderful dogs, and they come so far so fast. It's incredible to watch them come in, and a week later, from shy and timid to being outgoing and friendly.
You know, I'm thinking of the socialization that happens because how many inmates to 4 dogs? And so the dog right away is not just bonded with one person, which again makes it more difficult to go to a home situation, but goes to, is being cultured in with a group of people, and that sort of allows the dog to be used to a home situation with some children and teenagers and activity and,
I'm just wondering, do the inmates get attached to the dogs?
I bet.
Sorry.
Well, yes,
a dog person?
Because that's part of a trust situation.
I will tell you right now, and it's sad, but I think it's a beneficial thing. I've had several inmates have pictures of the dogs that they put on their wall that they've had. Some guys are best handlers. They love the dogs, and we continue to give them additional dogs because it's only a 12-week program. So they'll have many graduates, and they have the pictures like their own children. And sometimes, they're very saddened to see the dogs go, but they know that's all for the best. That the dogs are going to good home.
And they're going to get another one.
Well, if they're long enough to finish the next 12-week cycle, they'll get another one. Just to let you know, we can show this sometime. We had the 1-year anniversary. We brought back dogs. Most of the inmates had been gone, but there was a couple that were there. We brought back the families, the dogs. We had a reunion. It was covered by Channel 4, 5, 7. It was all over the Boston media. People could not believe what a beautiful story it was. Now we're proudly in year 4. So time flies, and the program has just gotten better and better.
Now, another project that I love, being from growing up on a farm, your organic farms. They produced almost 30,000 pounds of homegrown produce that is now being distributed at no cost to local community charities, like Catholic Charities, Salvation Army.
Yep.
Right now, thousands of pounds per week is being distributed. We're in the fall, it's harvest season. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, when I got to be the Sheriff's Department and we came up there and we looked at the 300 acres the Sheriff's Department sits in, we may have the oldest county facility. It's debatable depending how you look at it. But we have, in my mind, maybe the oldest facility, some ways the most decrepit, but the most beautiful grounds. And many of you have never even probably seen the House of Correction because where it sits. It's in West Boylston line. It's kind of up on a hill, and it's kind of isolated. But because of that, it sits on 300 bucolic acres. Well, my first thought was, why aren't we farming some of this land? We have inmates. We have the capacity for the land. Why don't we begin a program? So we looked into it. It cost us, now I'll give you the punchline because I love this. We started off at about $970 of seed. We had some old tools. I guess there might have been some program many years ago. We found the tools. We identified the inmates for this program. Again, these are low-risk offenders, people that have earned the right to do this. Believe me, inmates benefit from these programs. They are not forced into them. I've had people tell me, that's like slavery, what you're doing. And I said, ask my inmates. They volunteer for these programs. They're grateful for these programs.
They're outside, they're doing something,
they're learning a skill. What's interesting is we have two types of exterior programs. One are the inmates that go out into the communities like here in Fitchburg and Leominster, and they'll maybe paint a senior center, clean up a cemetery. We found, interestingly, the younger inmates, they love those programs. You know, they paint a wall, they see it. They were putting a seat in, and they couldn't understand why the next day it wasn't this tall, you know? So we found a little bit more of the seasoned inmates, a little older folks seem to have the patience to do the farming program. So in the 7 or 8 years we've been doing this, because I'm sheriff 8 years now, if you can believe it. But that program has continued to expand. We've gone from about 20,000 pounds to over 30. We've expanded the crops from what was initially squash and zucchini. Now we've got corn, and we've got pumpkins that we're distributing now, as you mentioned, the fall, and green beans and tomatoes. And the inmates love the program so much, they helped build a greenhouse.
Oh, wow.
And now we're growing things in the off-season like flowers and things like that.
And who's benefiting?
Who benefits this program? The jail saves about $20,000 a year in food costs because we serve the inmates some of this organic food, and we distribute the remainder of that, on average 300 pounds a day, to food pantries and food shelters throughout this county. And the people who get the recipients tell us, and I mean the people that work there, say, you're bringing medicine to people in this community that are used, maybe unfortunately can only get canned goods. We're bringing fresh organic vegetables. It's such a wonderful program. And Mary, we got the cost down to $350 now. So that's all for $350.
Are we ready to tie up our show?
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Sheriff Lew, you always come with way too much information, and we could really pack a full hour just with you alone and the dog programs, of course, we all love. Thank you so much for coming.
I want to thank you. I love being here. That was the fastest half hour I've... was it a half hour?
It was a half hour.
That was the fastest half hour I've sat down in a long time.
Thank you so much. And we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in tonight with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. As we leave you, we want you to remember that your local city and town Republican Committee is your only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and your conservative values. We encourage you to join us. Why? Because we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.